Welcome back to part two of this episode where I'm talking about contrast. I'm talking about probably the concept of my next book, which is tentatively going to be titled Too Early for Coffee. And the idea here is what can we do to get excited for the mundanity of the monotony of our lives? We all know that it's important to fall in love with boredom. We all know that consistency is important. We all know that the day-to-day actually matters much more than the highs and the lows, and the highs and the lows really actually only frame up our day-to-day. And so what I've always wondered whenever I've heard this kind of self-help advice is, cool, I get it, I buy into that. How do I actually get excited for the day-to-day? And then how do I actually live that day to day and maintain that excitement? There seemed to me to be something missing in kind of the self-help realm, where there's this disconnect. There's a lot of things that are really easy and nice to say and frame up and draw graphs of and whatever. But then you get down to the actual doing of the thing, and you're like, well, I still feel burned out day to day. Well, I still second guess myself. Will I still compare myself? Will I still have envy and jealousy? Will I still find that I fall into these ruts and routines that I'm not quite happy with? Well, I'm still not showing up the way that I want to show up to the people that I love to, and I feel guilty about that. But that takes me away from my business, and I also feel guilty about that. And so how do we get better at this stuff? And what I've done is really gone on a journey for the last 12 years and like trying to figure this out. It hasn't been a wealth optimization, hasn't even been a business optimization. It's like, okay, well, I'm a guy who grew up in a middle to upper class family in Toronto, thought that I was going to be a doctor, and then started basically traveling and an entrepreneurial journey and making up stuff on the internet, where I kind of fell into this life where I could design things, which is great because I can make it up as I go and it's fun and it's creative. But at the same time, it's really scary because nobody's telling me what to do, because there's no framework, because there's no walls for me to fit into. There's no structure. And so I've explored. I've really spent, when I think about it, 12 years exploring. And when I think about why some people out there who I've never met actually listen to me and take heed in some of the stuff that I say, which is wild and crazy and super cool, it's not because of any of the work I don't think that I've done in the business. I think it's because of my willingness to explore and try new things and meet new people and go to new places and try to look at as much as possible as an outsider and say, where can I fit this in to make me better, to make my life better, to help me be a better dad or son or friend or whatever, and throw out the rest, right? So we're going to continue on with that. Now, there's a lot that I plan that I hope to put into this book. And if I'm honest, it's not quite organized yet. I have, I think, all of the ideas there, but they're not quite organized yet because I haven't done the proposal, because I actually just handed in the final locked edited version of The Obvious Choice, which is exciting. So that's like basically the version that I handed in before was the manuscript. Then it goes to a copy editor. The copy editor does tons of little things and then sends it back. And then I have one last chance to go over it and basically make any edits or accept or reject the copy edits. Most of what they do is grammatical, but a lot of what they did is just they were able to bring clarity to a lot of the points. You know, as an outsider who knows nothing about this topic reading the thing, did it make sense? And what I actually really liked about it, and one of the increasingly as I go through this process with a publisher, with a big publisher with a lot of resources behind me versus self-publishing, I'm like, oh, this is why conventionally published books are better. Because they checked every single claim. They looked into every single story. I can't bullshit. Like even I made, I talked about bulletproof coffee, and I gave an example in the book about how bulletproof, their marketing said that this was the bed and nails paradox that I talk about with communication. I talked about how it's better to market on one thing than it is to market on a whole bunch of things. It's better to be one single nail than a bed of nails. And I give the example with bulletproof to show that it doesn't actually matter if other people in your industry know about the thing that you're talking about, that you're marketing on, because your customers don't. So Bulletproof, when they originally came out with their coffee, when they sold it at 5 times the price as anybody else, they marketed it based off of one central claim, which is they remove something called mycotoxins from their coffee. Basically, fungi that like causes cancer and whatever. They had all these studies showing how dangerous this stuff is. And it's true that these things, this fungi is really, really nasty stuff. What's also true is that all coffee in all production legally had to remove this stuff for the last 40 plus years. So you've actually never drank coffee in your life that hasn't had this stuff already removed. But what Bulletproof identified was the marketability in this stuff being in coffee production and having to be removed. And so anyway, so I said that. And I said that not to like shit on Bulletproof, although I guess kind of maybe it is. But I said that more than anything else. I said that more than anything else to demonstrate that even if something is obvious to you and people like you, there's still potentially a lot of marketability to it. And the copy editor came back and said, actually, I've checked out all of Bulletproof's marketing materials, and they never make that claim. And so I searched their website, and I was like, oh, yeah, he's right. I'm like, but I know that they did, because I wouldn't have written this if they didn't. So I went on the Internet Wayback Machine and found their website of their original sales materials when that coffee first came out. And in 2019, when the coffee first came out, that was a central theme in their marketing.
I so love that you did the sleuthing for that.
Well, so...
makes me so proud, because I would have done the same thing. Like, no, I remember.
Well, I remember that it is, but what I, what's I'm right. So, but also more than anything, what that shows you is that, if this was a self-published book, I can say whatever the hell I want. And it's one of those come at me, bro, if you want to sue me legal things. But like most of the time, it's not anything that anybody would sue you about. It's just, oh, I'm making claims or I'm telling this story about this person or whatever it is. And who knows whether it's true or it's not true. This process with HarperCollins, like it has to be true. Everything that was told to me in a private conversation, I have emailed legal clearance from the person who told me it. Like their section completed final, sent it to them and said, just want to verify that you're okay with this, that this is good.
How did they find the email for the Tuk Tuk prostitute? Or is that story not in the book? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Well, no, what happened was I emailed the government of Boracay in the Philippines, and I said, hey, Mr. G, I was there a whole bunch of years ago when I was walking down that beach. I think it was White Beach. I was walking down that beach at like 2 a.m. and this woman pulled my hand on her penis. And I just want to know her name, and I want to make sure that she did actually have a penis because I was intoxicated at the time. And they said, yeah, just a moment, Mr. Goodman. I'll get right on that. And they went and found the source. And so we're good.
Such compliant government over there at the Philippines. They really do a bang up job of customer service.
Yeah, they really do. Really, I mean, hats off to them. That was not a circumcision joke. Amber, play music.
You wish her hat was off. But that hat was on. That was on, buddy.
Hope we made you laugh, that you didn't choke on our enormously funny penis joke.
All of these had me laughing through them.
Moving on.
Oh.
Okay. Let's get to these 4 pieces that I want to talk about. Basically, those four more elements of this idea of contrast and getting you excited for your day to day that I want to hit on here. And like I said, this is not everything that's going to be in the book, not even close in terms of all the topics. But the first is I have found that having regrets is an inevitable part of life because you never get to replay an experience. You never get to replay a decision. You never know what would have happened if you made another decision. This is the sliding doors. It's like, oh, you miss the train, you catch the next train, you meet somebody else, whatever. Like, how many different things can happen? So you never know if you make one decision whether something else would happen, which means that in your own mind, even if objectively everything goes well, you never actually know whether you made the right decision, and you're always going to have regrets. So I think lesson number one is to accept that you're going to have regrets. And the second lesson is to make your regrets of commission and not regrets of omission. It is much better to do something and have it not work out than not do something and have nothing work out. And that's for a few reasons. The first is that even if something doesn't work out the way that you plan it to, it will more than likely work out in a way that you never could have anticipated if you didn't start. The second is that you're always going to learn something, no matter what you do. I mean, that's like bullshit, fluffy, like self-help advice, but like it's kind of true. You know, you're always going to learn something. If you do something, and you'll probably be able to use what you learned, or it'll help you make better decisions or navigate the world better at some point in the future in ways you could never comprehend right now. But you probably will when you go back and do a full accounting on your life, if you ever do, which you probably won't, but whatever. You get it. But the third is something that isn't spoken about enough, that I'll tell you a story to kind of illustrate. My friend Jason and I were texting the other day, and he was just in Costa Rica. Or he was in Costa Rica, actually, when we were texting. And I asked him how the vacation was going, because this is his first vacation that he's ever taken with two young kids. And he told me that it was just chaos. He's just like, yeah, man, if they're not like, I think actually I said they were I asked him if they were being little shits. I don't think he would have used those words because he's a lot nicer than me, has less of a filthy mouth. But they were just giving him a hard time. And so that's hard, right? You go out of your way to go on an adventure and have this experience with your family, with your wife, with your two young kids that you guys are going to talk about forever and take pictures of. And yet you're there and you had built it up as being this magical thing in the jungle, seeing monkeys and exploring and being on the beach and having warm weather in the middle of the winter. And then all of a sudden your kids are little shits the entire time. Well, that sucks. But one of the things that I find really interesting about the human condition is that experiences, even bad experiences, lead to fond memories.
Mm-hmm.
We seem to have a fondness of retelling when something was really bad, and that's then enjoyable. So doing something, going on an adventure, even if it's hard, even if it sucks, even if everything goes wrong, in fact, almost more so if something goes wrong, actually brings you more pleasure in the long run because of how much fun it is to retell when something went wrong. Think about the difference between these two things. Oh yeah, we went to Costa Rica. Oh man, it was amazing. Yeah, we had some tacos. We had some pico de gallo. We got some empanadas from this guy out of a truck. We sat on the beach. It was great. Yeah, no, the kids were wonderful. They found some other kids to play with. Wifey and I got a couple massages. And then we flew home. It was wonderful. Okay, that sucks as a thing. Or, oh man, the kids were nuts. And then this monkey came in and we had this lunch that we prepared and we worked so hard for it. And this freaking monkey came down and stole it. We had nothing to eat. We were starving. The kids were blowing up. We were so far away. It was so hot along the beach. And then, we found this guy selling coconuts, and he cut us a coconut and, showed us where he was getting it from, and blah, 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 blah. It's just like, you think about the difference between those two stories and how much fun it is to retell one and not the other. And that's, of course, an extreme case of like going to Costa Rica and monkeys stealing your food or whatever. But like, it's happened to me. You know what I'm saying? And so monkeys are actually really good at picking locks. It's really, I mean, they obviously can't do like combination. Like, they don't know what the combination is, but anybody who's lived in a place with monkeys, particularly like the cappuccino face monkeys, they're really smart. What they actually figure out locking mechanisms really, really quickly. And you keep having to change the lock mechanisms, and they can keep picking it and like stealing your food. So anyway, that's a thing.
Shout out to our offended group of the week, locksmiths. You're welcome.
Cappuccino monkey enthusiasts. Well, the cappuccino monkeys are actually like the little shit monkeys. Like, they're small and they don't look that intimidating, but they're actually carnivores and eat the babies of the howler monkeys. And the howler monkeys are super intimidating and make this really like almost evil, like scary, intimidating sound. But they're actually herbivores and they only eat plants. And then they get their babies eaten by these like cute little like cappuccino monkeys. So you never know.
Man, it's like an ayahuasca trip. How did we get here?
I feel like this reading rainbow, like the more you know, like sign is gonna like fly above my head right now.
That's awesome, though.
Doing that later.
Please do that.
Amber, you need a switchboard with sound effects, please. The reading
I have
rainbow.
one, but I need more.
Yeah.
We still have our other jingle too.
Contrast. Commission versus omission. It's way better to do a thing, even if that thing doesn't do well, even if that thing doesn't work out, than to not do the thing. Okay. Moving on. Anything you guys want to add? I should give you an opportunity to add anything there.
No, got nothing.
Good. All right. Moving on. So this one is somewhat counterintuitive. Now, maybe not to listeners who have been kind of hanging out with me for a while on the internet, because I've written about it and spoken about it before. But to a lot of people, this idea seems to be very counterintuitive, which is actually the way to have the most amount of freedom is to build a lot of structure into your life. So I say it simply as structure breeds freedom. I have set for myself and designed a whole bunch of rules that I operate by. Now, it's important to note here that these are rules that I design versus rules that someone else thrusts upon me. It was a famous study, I think it was Halvorsen was the researcher, but it was the difference between using the words I can't versus I don't, and in terms of self-control. And so the study was, I can't remember the numbers or anything specifically, but the way that the study went is they told people to tell themselves, or the people somehow told themselves, I can't eat chocolate or I don't eat chocolate. And then they went and offered them like a chocolate bar or something like that. And over 50% more people were able to resist the urge of the chocolate bar that were in the I don't group. And the reason for that is I can't is a forced restriction upon you, thereby taking away your personal autonomy. I don't is a personal restriction that's your own choice. And so as you make these rules, it's very important. Like when I say rules, it's very important to understand that the rules have to be rules that you design for yourself and decide upon for yourself versus rules that others thrust upon you. So if you're reading this and you're like, no, I hate rules, like that's largely why. So I thought that I would give you a couple of the rules that I've designed for myself. And some of these are like really silly and small. And this is not a complete list. But some of them are, much more meaningful, but they're all just little things. And like I said, this is largely about bettering my day-to-day versus what we often hear about, which are like huge transitions. Because I actually think it's much more important to do little things that make every day a little bit better than it is to sit there and say, How am I going to make my next million or whatever? And so number one is like, might be small, might sound silly, but if the light is red, I stop and wait. And I just look around. I don't jaywalk even if there's no cars. I don't cross the road. I don't pull my phone out. I just use that as a 15, 20, 30-second moment to just catch my breath. Super simple. Try it today. If you're going for a walk, if you get to a red light, even if there's no cars coming the other way, just stop. Now, you can have some fun with this because human beings very much copy other human beings and look for cues in our day-to-day of like what to do and what's appropriate to do. So oftentimes, most of the time, if there's no cars coming and there's a red light, people will cross the road, at least where I live. And so what I'll do is I stop, and then everybody else kind of stops because they look around. Because somebody else has stopped, they assume that there's some danger, there's some reason to stop. And then what I'll sometimes do when I'm feeling like kind of a jackass and want to do a social experiment is I'll pretend to step on the road, and then I'll step back, and I'll just watch everybody else do it. Anyway, this is how I have fun. Another rule is, I wrote about this on Facebook the other day, is I just always have a book on me. I always have a book on me, usually fiction. Oftentimes my Kindle, so that the smaller Kindle devices are nice because they fit in a pocket. Or if you are with your significant other and she's a woman or identifies as a woman and has a purse with her, then you can just tell her to put your book in her purse. Allison loves it when I do that.
For all women, get your own damn fanny pack. We are not your pack mules.
I love that you said that.
It's a personal pet peeve of mine. As someone who actually doesn't carry a purse, it infuriates me to carry everyone else's shit.
Well, if you got the bag, you're holding my stuff. That's it. That's the rule.
That's what it is.
It's just the rule.
Merce.
Hey, can you put this in your bag? Hey, can you put this in your bag? That's what I'm saying it the whole time.
Way to be outnumbered, Amber. Carry your shit.
Carry your own shit.
But it's the simplest thing ever. Because when you have a book on you, you reach for a book in those in-between moments. One of the things that happened to me, particularly when I had children, was I found that there were a lot of in-between moments in my day where I did not know how long those moments were going to be. I didn't know whether, let's say like Calvin or Jaden is napping. I don't know whether they're going to be 5 minutes or an hour. And that can be really, really difficult because I can't really start something because then I get really frustrated when I stop it. And so over the years, it started actually when I was training clients. I always had a book on me because I just didn't know who would be late or not late. So I always had a book on me. And I trained myself to just be okay reading a book or two, reading a page or two at a time. Easier with fiction than nonfiction. Possible with nonfiction as well. But to not feel bad if I only read a page, because reading a page is better than not reading a page, and reading a page is definitely better than reaching for your goddamn phone and swiping and looking what Margaret, your ex-girlfriend, is doing on her beach vacation with her new boyfriend. Fucking Margaret. She was always, I don't know, Margaret. She was always on the beach, that Margaret. Eating hot wings. Why didn't you eat hot wings on a beach, Margaret?
Nothing adds up there. Nothing adds up. Sticky hands, sand, sun, it's hot wing. Like none of that makes sense.
Nothing.
Do better, Margaret.
Do better. Where are you going to get milk? Where are you going to get milk to cut the heat of the wings on the beach?
The teat of a whale, John. Whale teat Seriously. Milk.
Find that picture, Margaret. Better than reaching for your phone. So, one of the rules, just always have a book on you. If I'm taking a walk, if I'm walking, Jaden in the stroller or something like that, I'll just throw a book underneath in the stroller. Stop in the park, whatever. That way, if he stops in the park and plays, or if we see a friend or something like that, and he's playing with a friend, I can just take out the book and read a little bit. That has in terms of my mental awareness, in terms of reducing brain fog, in terms of energizing me throughout the day, figuring out ways to not knee-jerk reach for my phone in those in-between moments has, I think, probably has had a bigger impact than anything else. Number 3 has to do with phone 2. Now, we're not as good at this right now as we have been in the past, but keep a phone at the entrance of our house and don't bring it into the home. So we used to, we don't anymore, but shit, I want to get back to it now that I'm reading this, is the phone doesn't enter the home. At the entrance where we come in, we have the chargers, and when we come into the house, we plug in our phone and we charge it there, and if we want to use it, we can use it. It's perfectly fine. You use it at the door. You can talk on it, you can flip through it, whatever it is. That's also great, especially when you have kids like Calvin who, of course, notice what you do, and you don't want him to see you on your phone all the time. You want him to see that it's like a device that is useful but should be controlled. Email, controlling email, looking at email as a place where tasks accumulate, not as a task in and of itself. So email generally can be bucketed into a few different categories: customer service, accounting, random inquiries, client updates, whatever. You probably have 4 or 5 different categories that your emails come into. I actually have a separate folder in my Gmail inbox for each category. And what I do when I go in to check so one of my tasks is go in and check my email. And then what I do in that task is I go through that and I actually just file my emails into each of the appropriate folders. And then each of the folders is a different task. It's kind of like a conveyor belt. It's kind of like a warehouse. It's much easier to answer 5 client inquiries or 5 program update, whatever emails all at once than to task switch one to the next, to the next, to the next. We know this from Dr. Gloria Mark's work, who we did an interview with. If you scroll back, you can find her. You just Google search her interview with me on this podcast. And Dr. Gloria Mark is a researcher in focus and attention with technology. And what she talks about is just how difficult task switching is on our brain. Every time that you go to do something, your brain pulls up what she calls a mental schema, basically a blueprint for how to complete that task. And it takes you about 20 minutes to switch from one mental schema to another mental schema. Mm-hmm. And it's also exhausting. It's energetically really taxing on your system. And so if you're going through a series of 10 emails, and every time that you open an email, you're having to think, okay, this I have to deal with this way. Okay, answer it. And then you go to the next. You're actually task switching every single time. And that's a really, really damaging thing. Touch it once, similar. If this is what the Filipino man prostitute said to me is touch it once. The song, please.
Hope we made you laugh, that you didn't choke on our enormously funny penis joke.
Oh, that's never going to get old.
Ever so eager.
That's never going to get old. Touch it once has to do with email too, but it has to do with a lot of stuff. Like, don't open and then mark as unread a message. You know, if you're going to open it, deal with it or file it and then move on. This one's important to me. The next rule is keep the special things special. My friends laugh at me because I'm amazed at the silliest things. Like, we don't have a TV in our house. And that's not because I think that TV is bad. That's not because I don't like TV. That's not because I'm holier than thou or anything like that. We don't have a TV in our house because I think that TV is fucking phenomenal. I think it's remarkable. I think television, especially now with Netflix, with Amazon Prime, with everything, oh my God, it's incredible. How does this exist? Like, think about what's happening with TV. Think about what's happening with your phone. You're pressing a button on a box. It's sending a signal to space. Space is then sending a signal back at the speed of goddamn light. And it's showing you all of the collected facts of human existence, or the best entertainment that's ever been made. And all the entertainment, basically, that's ever been made, reflected in light-emitting diodes on the screen. That is remarkable. And yet, it's really easy to take it for granted. Because it's so democratized, it's so commonplace, that it's become normalized. And so I've just decided that one of my life philosophies is to keep the special things special, is to try to keep alive a lot of the little magic. And there's a number of ways that we do this. One is things like TV, for sure. Like if I watch a baseball game or a hockey game, like it's a big deal for me. Like I really enjoy it and I watch the shit out of it. But also, if Allison and I are going to go out for dinner, we don't do it very often. Restaurants are incredible. But we go out for a really nice dinner. And we really appreciate that dinner. And so I think just reminding ourselves at all of the little aspects of magic and miracles, really, that exist, that did not exist. It's like the famous thought experiment. It's like, would you trade places with John Rockefeller, who is, probably controlled for inflation, the richest man ever to live? And it's like, would you trade places with him? Well, he was the richest man by far in his time. He could have anything in his time, like that, snap of his fingers. You know what he didn't have? He didn't have a car. He didn't have air conditioning. He didn't have a dishwasher. Now, we probably had people to wash dishes. But he didn't have a dishwasher. He didn't have planes. He didn't have TV. And so you start to think about all these things. It's like, actually, a lot of the stuff that basically even lower to middle class people can have now, and mostly all have, a car that drives the speed limit, pretty cheap air travel. Even the richest people in the world didn't have 120, 150 years ago. That's pretty amazing. I have a lot more rules. I'm not going to read over any more of them. I've got a longer list that I plan to go through, but I'm talking too much and we're making too many penis jokes, which are amazing. But I'll say one of them. I'll say one more of them, which is just as I'm looking through this list, I'm like, yeah, that's worth mentioning, and it's quick to talk about. It's not as quick to talk about if I'm spending this much time explaining how quick it is to talk about. The thing that I'm going to talk about is much quicker to talk about, but talking about the thing that I'm going to talk about seems to be taking a very long time, and it's really extended. So here's the thing that I'm going to talk about. That's short, of course. Is
Samir is my sex life. Never as long as the discussion. I digress. I'm sorry, John. Go ahead.
it's say the nice thing you're thinking.
That's awesome.
Say the nice thing that you're thinking.
John, that's one of your more likable tips of all time. It almost insinuates that you're genuinely a nice person, and I really enjoyed hearing you say that. As he takes a swig of pop to now insult me.
Okay. So those are the first two. Make your regrets of commission, not omission. And then structure breeds freedom. Number 3 is you hear about presence. You hear about be present. You hear about live in the moment a lot of the time. I actually think that the best way to be more present is to be lost, is to go without a map. Did you know that over 90% of car accidents happen within 2 miles of somebody's house. And the reason for that is quite simple. When we're close to our home, the environment, the streets are familiar. Therefore, we shut off and go into autopilot and stop paying attention to a lot of the little details. And that's when car accidents happen. The most aware that I've ever been was when, so we were in Sengigi, which is a town on Lombok, which is one of the provinces in Indonesia.
You're just making shit up at this point.
Yeah.
Those are not
It's not a real place.
And so we rented this house at the top of this hill in Sengigi, and it was this beautiful house. And with the house came what we thought was a moped, which we had been driving mopeds in Southeast Asia for a lot of years. Turns out it was a full-on motorbike. Now, I've never driven a motorbike before. I've never driven, particularly changed gears on a motorbike before, because a lot of the mopeds are like 250cc things, like whatever, putt-putt little automatic things. Okay, so I get on this motorbike, and I drive it down the hill, and I drive it up the hill a few times to get used to the gears. And then Allison hops on the back, and we set off. Sengigi, I mean, a lot of these towns are kind of like this, but Sengigi is like a reasonably well-populated town. It's busy, and so you would have, like, call it a 4-lane road, but there's effectively 8 lanes of traffic moving at the same time. And it's mostly motorbikes. There's some cars, but it's almost all motorbikes. And the thing, for anybody who's driven in Southeast Asia, the thing is, like, ain't nobody going in the same direction. Doesn't matter what side of the road you're on. Nobody's going in the same direction. But I actually found that it was safer to drive there than I feel driving in Canada. Because when you're driving in Canada, yes, there are rules to the road, but the driving is almost, this is going to be weird to say, the driving is almost too easy. And there's a lot of distracted driving as a result. What I remember about driving that motorbike in Sengigi is that, yeah, sure, somebody's coming at me on the wrong side of the road head on directly at me. But both of us are paying full attention. And I also know that they're just going to keep coming straight. It's the assertiveness in the driving that makes it more safe. It's not the dipping in, dipping out. And I'm not saying that our road should be like that, but I'm only bringing it up to demonstrate that when things are unfamiliar, when things are a little bit less predictable, we pay attention a lot more to them. And that's a great way to be more present in your everyday. There was Michael Easter sent an email out that I thought was great a couple weeks ago. He said 6 benefits of getting lost. And his 6 benefits were: you get more thrills, you get the mindfulness without the meditation, you learn new ideas and skills, you get a big mindset boost, you burn more calories, and you get a dang good story. When we travel, we don't look up anything about the place we're going to. Even when we go to a tourist place, we never look at pictures. Because you look at pictures that are on Google, and then you get to the place, and you're like, yeah, this fucking castle looks like the pictures. But, like, it's not as crisp, and it's not as sunny of a day. So you're setting yourself up for disappointment. We get to the castle, and we're like, holy shit, it's a castle! I didn't even know this was supposed to be a castle. And then everybody laughs at us, because, of course, it's a castle. There's a quote that I really liked. Where is it? Here. It's by Rumi. And the quote is, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment."
Mm.
I think that it would be nice if we could just get back in touch with what it was like at the beginning of the process, where everything feels alive, where everything feels new. When we're first, this is Buscaglia, I think you pronounce his name. Buscaglia. He's like a happiness author guy who's a couple of books I read over the last while. He said, uh, go back to the moment when you were seeing your first tree, when we were all first brailing the world. There was something about that analogy of brailing the world that I really liked. So the way to be more present, counterintuitively, is to actually get lost, to not bring a map with you, to experience things as an outsider for the first time, or fabricate that. This does not mean that you need to go to a new country, but perhaps take a walk in a different neighborhood. Perhaps try a food that you would never otherwise eat, that weird ethnic place that sits on the corner of the street that you're not quite sure why it's there, but I don't know, go there and say, what do you like? And don't even look at the menu and just eat whatever they give you. It's actually my favorite way to eat. My favorite hotels to stay in and places to stay in and stuff like that are ones where they don't give you a menu, where they just serve you food. I mean, they ask for dietary restrictions and whatever, but you sit down from whatever it is, like 12 to 2 p.m., and they bring you lunch. It's always going to be good. You're never going to wish that you ordered the fish if the steak isn't good. Because even if the steak isn't good, you're like, well, it was steak, That was the option. Number 4. Comparison. Let's talk about comparison. Let's talk about envy. Let's talk about comparison. Because goddamn, those things take a lot of people down these days, myself included. And it can make a good day really shit really fast, can it? But the most embarrassing thing about envy is that the people we envy most are usually those people who are closest to us. Family members envy other family members, neighbors envy other neighbors, teammates envy teammates, musicians envy musicians, farmers envy farmers. I don't actually know where this quote is from because I don't have the source, but it's not mine. But if you follow the herd, you'll end up stepping in shit.
I like that.
The only people who can serve others are secure people. Only secure people can serve. And so I've thought, how can I be more secure? Because I definitely fall into traps of envy and comparison and holding myself to such unsustainably high standards that it handcuffs me and paralyzes me from actually doing anything. And what that does is that takes me away from being able to serve others. And that's a real problem. And when I think about it, it's actually because I'm less secure in that moment. And the reason that I'm less secure is that I've fallen into a community and becoming obsessed with the community because it's in front of my face, not realizing how little that represents of the greater world or of what I desire of the greater world. I think what happens is that a lot of people who develop into leaders, now leaders in your community, leaders amongst your clients, I say leaders, not like giant leaders, right? Like leaders could be of a gym. You could be a leader of your client base. You're a leader still. I think a lot of the time when people start off as leaders, they start off, call it as servants, but they end up as celebrities. And what happens then is the spotlight becomes addictive. And if you've ever been on stage and stared into a spotlight, you'll know it blinds you. You don't see what else is there. And that's fine sometimes when you're on stage. But like domesticated oxen, you become driven by what you perceive your audience wants of you. And that can be a really big problem. Because the stuff that your audience is going to give you that you respond to, you start doing more and more of, and then what you do more of, you start to become. And that starts to change you, and you continually get blinded by this spotlight. I love reading books, but what I also, the problem with only reading books, and I love reading books, and I almost always only read books, but the problem with only reading books is that books are written by authors. Books are written by people who have gone out and said, I want to write a book. Now, that's great in almost every case. But, number one, it self-selects for a tiny subsection of the population, because writing a book is hard and most people don't want to write a book or never get around to it. But also, in order for a book to be marketable, it has to meet with the greater batch of, call it like 101 level people. It has to be marketable in that way, which means it's never going to be able to get into the depth or the nuance that a lot of the time I think is quite useful. And then, of course, you think about just all of the things that people have to offer that don't end up writing books, or nobody writes books about their lives. And so in addition to reading books, I try to find collections of letters that have been saved and published over the years. Because the letters are very often written by people who are really self-reflecting, but they're not doing it to impress anybody else. Sometimes they're writing it to themselves, or the quote that I'm going to give you right now is from a fabulous little collection called Letters from a Self-Made Merchant. So this was from this guy, I think it was put out in like 1902 or something like that, but it was the self-made merchant who was writing letters to his son. And those letters were collected and turned into this collection. One of the things he said is, a man who does big things is too busy to talk about them. When the jaws really need exercise, chew gum. There are, how many Hall of Fames do you think there are in the US, Ren? Take a guess.
I'd say 10.
Bro, there's 750 Hall of Fames. There's a personal trainer Hall of Fame. Did you know that? It's the biggest load of fucking bullshit. It's such complete and comical nonsense. It's a marketing tool put out by a company to sell their shit.
Right.
But they call it a Hall of Fame. So there's 750 Hall of Fames. How many Who's Who publications do you think there are in the US?
Oh man, probably 1 billion.
Only 450.
I get a lot of those.
But the thing that's interesting is that, I mean, if you search for those awards, you're probably going to end up getting it. But the awards really are not reflective on the impact that you've had. And in fact, I mean, not so much in sports. Sports, the Hall of Fames mean something, but when you look at like business people, you look at authors, you look at, call it, I don't know, whatever, thought leaders, like people can, like scientists, whatever, you know, other than the Nobel Prize, the Pulitzer, whatever it is, the awards mean nothing to them. In fact, most of them don't even show up at the award shows. They don't even accept it. This just means nothing. And they're also not a reflection of what sells. I mean, look at Pulitzer Award-winning books and look at them of like lists of bestsellers. Like they're almost never on it. That's not saying that you shouldn't strive to write that. But the point is, this idea of envy and comparison kind of detours your life and leads to a dead end. It no matter what you do, when you surround yourself with other people like you too much and never remove yourself from it, it's going to extract a really large emotional cost without a payoff. It's gonna misuse your time and energy. it doesn't really matter objectively who's better off, does it? If everybody is doing well, if everybody is doing okay. Now, I mean, I'm saying this fully understanding the psychology of the thing, that really my contentment has more to do with how much better I think that I'm doing than my neighbors than just about anything else. And so actually, if you want to really be happy and you're middle class, move into a poor neighborhood. You'll probably be happier than living in a bigger house in a more expensive neighborhood. I saw this, those like standard distribution curves where it's like basically an inverted U, so it's like flat and then there's like a big U. And then, so I saw this standard distribution curve that was really funny, which was, it was like cars owned based off of how much money somebody had. And at the bottom of the standard distribution, the poorest people was a Toyota. And then right in the middle was just like all of the luxury cars. And then at the far end of the distribution, the richest people was also a Toyota.
That's awesome. That's so true.
That was funny. So, all of this to say, it's natural to compare. I don't think you're going to be able to not compare. But I think that you have to work in an element of contrast into what you do, and you need to get a better view. Every so often, you need to get a new view. You need to expose yourself to people in other industries, people who have divergent thoughts, people who live somewhere else. Whether you go there or not is kind of irrelevant. But it's pretty cool when if I'm in like a fitness conference of like fitness entrepreneurs, I compare myself to them. Right? And there's inevitably going to be some people who are doing better than me. I don't know whether they are or not, but like they put off like they are. And I compare myself to them. And I go home thinking less of myself. But then I go to events where there's nobody else in fitness. With people, there's like plumbers. There's a dude who owns a mushroom farm. Like it's all over the place, right? And I go there and I'm all of a sudden really happy for their success. And they're really enthusiastic about mine. And it's a really cool feeling that I come back. I come back energized instead of downtrodden. I think I'll stop there. There's a lot more that I could say. I mean, this doesn't even scratch the surface of what I'm going to be covering in this next book. But I really think that there's something to this idea of you actually really need to get excited for your day-to-day. I actually think that if you can design a life that makes you the little things like stopping at a traffic light, even if there's nobody coming the other way, the measurable positive impact that's going to have on your life is going to outweigh just about anything else that you do. And I think that that's a missing element in a lot of self-help. And I think a lot of it has to do, or at least bridges off of this central underlying philosophy of actually don't seek one thing, seek contrast. Seek the difference of the two things as a way to make you more appreciative of one when you have it, and view things like an outsider to be able to get a new view, to remove yourself from your world, to be able to better insert yourself back into it, to live better. Keep playing around with these concepts on the podcast, of course, a fair bit. And as I start to write more and more of it, I figure the proposal will be done in like 2-3 weeks. The proposal for this one, because I have to propose it, basically my initial publishing deal required like a 30-day, you show it to HarperCollins again before I ship it to anybody else. And so I actually don't have to write a full 80-page proposal. And to be honest, I don't, as long as they give me a reasonable advance, I don't care about the money. It's not about the money for these books. So as long as they give me a reasonable advance that shows that they're bought into the premise and they're going to put some resources behind it, there's no point for me to shop it around. So a proposal won't take too long to put together. I don't know. What episode do you want to recommend? Let's do the Don DePonte one, maybe. That was a good one. You like that one, Amber? I feel like that fits.
Yeah, you know I love him.
Yeah. Don DePonte is he was a Hindu monk for 10 years in a monastery, left, and so now he's technically a Hindu priest who consults entrepreneurs on how to be more present, focus, fulfillment, purpose. And he's become a great friend over the last really decade. He's helped me through a lot of questions like what is enough? And so I had the chance to actually sit down and interview him for an hour, which was super fun. And I mean, we've had conversations going for hours and hours and hours, but they were never recorded. And so I think you'll enjoy this episode. It was great. We got to reminisce a lot too, which was fun. Episode 193. Have a listen to that. It's called Don DePonte, Finding Fulfillment According to a Hindu Priest. Amber, you want to play that jingle? Jingle us out.
Always.
Hope we made you laugh, that you didn't choke on our enormously funny penis joke.